TC Electronic.
Talking about phasers.
Helix Phaser.
Set your phasers to
Stun.
Exactly.
So I figured that it would be cool to kind of go through, well, specifically the Helix Phaser, but also the editor in terms of talking a little bit about different phaser sounds and what you can do to kind of tweak the sound to allow for different things. So you use phasers from time to time, right?
Yeah, I love them. Yeah, for both lead guitar sounds and sometimes vibey rhythm guitar sounds or arpeggiated stuff, just anything, that you want watery and to have a little bit of movement.
Yeah.
Yeah. Phasing, I mean, first we should tell people what phase is.
Yeah.
So can you explain what the phaser does as an effect?
Yeah, basically, at the core of what a phaser does is that it makes a duplicate of your signal.
Right.
And then, depending on the algorithm and how you kind of tweak it, it makes a series of spikes or notches in your sound, in the duplicated sound.
Okay.
That basically accentuates certain frequencies.
Right.
Then it takes those notches and move them
back
and forth in the frequency spectrum.
Yeah.
Sums the two signals together, and that gives you what if you played it without moving, you use that as your core guitar sound, you'd think something was wrong, because it basically just cancels out a bunch of frequencies,
right,
which makes the guitar sound kind of
like hollow
or weird.
Right.
And if that happened, phasing can happen even if you have like two amps playing at the same time.
Right. Like when I think of when you're running two amps and they're out of phase, generally what's happening is the speaker on one amp can be pushing out while the other one is going backwards, right? And when you do that, it sounds like when you stand in the middle of the two amps, it makes you feel like you're seasick, like you hear this hollow kind of, the bottom end drops out and it gets all thin. Yeah. But with the phaser, you're constantly shifting that phase, right? And so you hear it as more of a sweep.
Yeah, right? Which is cool. And you probably don't want to play with it on all the time, but as an effect for certain things, it's a really, really cool effect.
Right.
So the phaser algorithm basically determines a couple of key things. So if we again imagine, maybe we'd even we'll see if that happens or not, but we'd put up some kind of graph showing this.
Yes.
But if you imagine these spikes, a phaser algorithm, on a lot of them you can choose how many you have. Mm-hmm. So unlike the classic orange MXR pedal,
it's 4, right?
4.
Right.
But you can also add more. So you could have 8, or you could have 10.
Or
some
12.
phasers even have 12. On this one, we have a choice of 4, 8, or 10.
Okay.
So we can hear how the different ones sound.
Okay.
You can also choose how spiky and narrow those spikes are, and that will change the sound quite dramatically.
Okay.
And you can also change how fast they move back and forth in the...
and that would be the speed.
That would be the speed. And the last thing, or one of the last things you can typically choose, is also feedback, which basically is an extra thing where you take part of the signal that you create and feed back into the circuit once again. And the more you do that, the more of an extreme effect you will get.
Okay, cool.
So we can fuss around with a couple of different parameters, and people can kind of hear that. And hopefully at the end of it, we'll have created some kind of sound that's pleasing to the ears, and then people can use that as a starting point to dial in their own sound.
Excellent. Well, why don't we start with kind of a medium slow raid, which I think we got dialed up now, and you were saying, are we on the 4
right
spike?
Now we're on the 8 spike.
8 spike.
Yeah, so let's move it down to the 4 spike, and then you can hear the difference.
Okay, and should I just play, and you can kind of move, and on the screen you can see what Tore is doing, right? To the
Yeah.
I don't even know what I'm playing. I don't know, like Jimmy Page or something. But that's cool.
Yeah.
So all right. So we're on the four spike setting right now.
Yeah, and I think it should be pretty obvious for people to hear. There's quite a dramatic difference between in sound depending on how many of those spikes or filters you add.
So if I just let a chord ring out, and we're on 4 now, let's change from 4 to 8.
Oops, just a second. There we go.
And this is 10. I just hear it's getting more intense and more sort of out of phase, apparently.
Yeah.
Right, as you change it.
Yeah.
So, So it's interesting. I've always considered sort of the classic sort of orange phaser or whatever, the 4, and what do they call it? 4
comb filters.
4 comb filters, right? 4 stage.
Yeah, 4 stage,
often,
that's
right?
That's right. Yeah.
I've always heard that as kind of the one that I prefer the most because it's a little less aggressive or something. And it just sounds a little warmer to me.
Yeah.
Whereas then the other ones get 4, 8, 10, 12 get progressively sort of more comb filtery sounding.
Yeah.
Okay, so this sounds nice for my little guitar part I was playing, I think. I like that. Yeah. So, okay, now moving along to some of the other parameters.
Yeah, so speed we'll just jump across from that one because there's a stereo option, so you can have 2 different comb filters for the left and right channel. But let's leave that alone. We'll play in mono here.
Okay.
So the next obvious one is the speed. So again, we have 4 comb filters now, and they're moving at a fairly slow pace, and we can speed that up.
Okay.
And we can back it down afterwards if that's what you prefer, just to give people an idea of what it sounds like.
Okay.
Or super fast. Or very, very slow.
It's almost, this is when it gets imperceptible almost because you can't really hear it doing its thing when it's super slow, right? Right, yeah. When it's set slow like this, it'd be kind of almost the classic Van Halen setting, turning the phase all the way down. Yeah. It's a slow sweep across your distortion sound if you have one going, right? Okay, cool.
Yeah. So the next one is the depth, and that basically determines how wide these spikes are.
Yeah.
And the wider they are, the more extreme the phasing is going to be. So turning it all the way down.
Don't really hear it. And
then all the way up. If we turn this up a bit as well.
Yeah, and so you had it somewhere in the middle to start with, right? Which sounds really nice. It's a little more subtle. Yeah, cool.
So those are the key parameters. And then the last one that you'll find on a lot of phases, because pretty much all of these, on a lot of phases, you don't have an option of choosing the amount of stages.
Okay.
A lot of them just have like 1. And many of them have 4, so that's where we start. The depth they'll typically have.
Okay, yeah.
Speed is pretty much on all of them. Even like the simplest one, which would be the MXR Phase 90, only has the speed knob. Everything else is basically just set inside the pedal at one fixed value. But you'll find a lot of other phases where you have some of these things and you can tweak around with it.
Yeah.
The last one is feedback, which you'll find on a lot of phases as well.
Okay.
And right now I've set it to 0 because that would be kind of like this is just hearing the dry signal and the wet signal moving with those phase spikes that you're hearing. But as soon as you start adding feedback, then you're basically taking the wet signal and you're feeding it back into itself to create an even more extreme effect.
Okay.
So let's crank it up. I will crank it up a little bit to begin with so you can start hearing it. I can crank it all the way, but feedback almost pretty much works like it would do on a delay pedal. So if you start getting more repeats of the signal, these are only happening like very shortly, lightning fast after each other. But like on a delay pedal, if you turn the feedback up to 100% or more, it starts to self-oscillate, and you can actually get this thing to do the same thing. So you got to be a little careful with it.
Yeah, it'll start to resonate and oscillate, right, in a weird way.
Start making all these kind of weird bird whistling kind of things.
Okay. Oh yeah, it gets real spiky and weird.
There you go. That's the bird chirping.
Violent feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the classic sort of orange phaser, what would it be?
It's a good question. We never really opened up one of these and measured what they do. So I honestly don't know. It's more of an ear kind of thing. My guess is that they don't set it super aggressively, but probably, in the vicinity of 20 to 30% or something like that.
Okay.
I think there's some sort of feedback in there, but,
Yeah.
we've never really spent the time to kind of reverse engineer their pedal.
It seems to sound about right to me around here for that sort of sound. Maybe I would turn it down just a little bit
more,
maybe 20% maybe or something, because it gets a little aggressive in that one top end frequency. Yeah, it seems to sound pretty good there.
So one interesting thing as well is that feedback, you can add those extra, the signal that you kind of pass back into the pedal again.
Sure.
You can either add that by, basically in the algorithm adding it to the original signal, or you can subtract it from the original signal, which gives you negative feedback.
Negative feedback, right.
And it's a very different sound. So we can actually set it to exactly the same amount, only in negative feedback, and people can hear the difference. So here's the positive feedback.
Which I really like, actually. It's a cool sound. Yeah.
Just exaggerating that a bit more. It's more of a vocal sound, maybe.
Yeah, it's cool.
Compared to...
It's much more pleasant, the negative feedback, isn't it? It's like more of a warm... When you go and you boost it up high, it gets aggressively bright, right?
Yeah.
Like so. Kind of like the negative feedback for the warmth. Maybe we should set it around 20% or 18. I dig that.
So that's, that would be pretty much the parameters you'd have to tweak on more, full-featured phasing pedals from pretty much any company. Then we have a couple of extra things that we can add to that. We can change the range, because typically if you want to use the phaser for example, bass or low-tuned guitars, the problem with a phaser is that it's set to very specific frequencies. So if you tune lower, for example, they don't always want to grab the right frequency. So this little toggle switch here allows you to basically just drop the whole thing down the range a bit, so you can hear the difference.
Okay. And that's the lower setting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the high setting. This is the lower setting. And the higher setting. It's a subtle kind of thing.
No, it definitely makes a difference, though. Yeah, one's a little more aggressive than the other one. Interesting. Cool.
Then we can flip the phase, but that's really,
flip the phase of your phaser.
Yeah.
Much better in that setting.
Yeah, and it's more to do with, when you're playing stereo, it becomes a little bit more important.
Okay.
Then we have, which you won't find on a lot of phasers, we actually have a mix parameter that allows you to blend in less of the wet signal.
So you can make it real subtle?
Yeah, so you can make it super subtle, because typically most phasers are just set so that they have equal amounts of wet and dry.
Right.
But we can hear how it sounds if we back it down a bit.
Okay. So when it's at 100%, it's basically 50-50 dry and wet.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it.
So the way we do it is that we don't mess with the dry signal, so that's always
In there 100%.
in there 100%. You just mix in the wet signal on top of it.
Got it.
Out level basically just controls how loud the pedal is. And then we can add some drive and some cut to the feedback, because I'll just show you. Let's see here. If we go back to that pretty annoying chirping thing.
Or close to it.
Yeah, or close to it. So now we have this. It's not chirping a lot, but it's just there. We can actually.
Was that a HiCut?
Yeah, so it's a HiCut. We can control the frequency where it starts cutting and the amount of dB that it cuts.
Ah.
So that it's a way of allowing you to add more feedback without getting that. So now I can actually, now I crank the feedback all the way up. So I can get a quite aggressive, aggressive phasing sound without getting into that kind of.
Ah!
So you see, there you go.
You hurt me.
Sorry.
Yeah, definitely. So it's just a different sound.
Yeah.
Another parameter you can mess with. Cool.
So we'll go back to the negative feedback around.
Cool.
So there you go. That's I guess that's a TonePrint that you could use as a starting point for creating your own.
Yeah, I mean it's a great sort of four-stage, really great sounding, starting point for a nice four-stage phasing sound. Yeah. Cool.
There you go. What you want to call it?
What are we going to call it? We're going to call it. Oh God, I'm drawing a blank. You're making me think of too many names.
Yeah, and you're jet lagged on top of everything else.
Yeah. Let's just call this one Pete's Basic Phase.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.